Yes, thank you. Good morning. I think a lot of the background to the mission is set out in the fact sheets. If I can perhaps just personalise that and add to it. The mission was set up in 2006 to develop and support Palestinian civil police. I emphasise the civil police, what on the ground we term the blue police, the civilian police. The intention, again, is to develop Palestinian police, not to replicate the Brussels police or the London Metropolitan Police. This is a Middle East Arab police force we're seeking to develop. Very much the key role is advising, mentoring, supporting the Palestinian police, the 6,900 police currently in the West Bank, working with the new Chief of Police, Major General Hazim Atala, who I see 2 or 3 times a week, also the Minister of the Interior. All my officers are police field advisors, specialist advisors, come from 15 member states plus Norway, and we're waiting 2 Canadian officers to join us. So there's a breadth of international experience. They spend most of their day out in the field in the 70 plus police stations, police commands, training centre. We do specialist training, so they're out on the ground working with the Palestinians, coordinating with them, advising them. Part of our work is also to facilitate bilateral projects. The anecdote I use is if you come to Palestine to give them advanced driver training, you can't do that if they haven't got sufficient vehicles. So part of the work is very much around infrastructure. They have, I believe, Palestinian police, a high capability. They've got good leadership. They have, since Oslo II, 1994, received quite substantial training in the period to 2000, the Second Intifada. Many of them hold degrees. Many of their senior officers hold master's degree in law, so they're very capable, skilled. They have capability, but what they lack is capacity. They lack the capacity, the ability. And when I talk about capacity, I mean communications, radio, networked IT system. They only have about 140 computers in the whole of the West Bank. They're not networked. They don't have internet connection. They need training. They need a forensic laboratory to do evidence-based investigation. So they need very much what we in any police force in the member states would take as given. They need that to take it forward. And that is part of the reason very supportive of the Berlin Conference to dedicate the funding, some of the funding that was pledged in Paris in December, to specifically now tie that to some of those infrastructure projects to develop their capacity. As I said, the mission really started to look at the civil police. We then developed to look at penal capacity of the prisons, because the prisons are run by the police, and we took the view very early on, which I think has been supported, that there's no point developing one part of the criminal justice system if you don't develop the other parts. So we looked at the prisons. Again, very poor capacity of about 600. We estimate, the Netherlands government did a report at the end of last year, that they probably need 1,500 capacity. A lot of the prisons were destroyed during the Second Intifada, as were their forensic laboratory training. So much of that infrastructure was destroyed, but particularly the prisons. But the problem is not the prisons. We looked at them and found out that 80% of people in Palestinian prisons were pre-sentenced. So some of them had been to a court, but they hadn't been sentenced. So increasing prison capacity is simply going to increase the number of prisons. So we took a further step with colleagues in other member states to look at the criminal justice, to look at the judiciary. Why are so many people in prisons? And again, you find the same story: infrastructure, training, capacity. So with effect, at the moment, we are now expanding the mission. As Keith has said, we have 33 at the moment. We'll expand to over 50. Those additional posts will be judges, barristers, prosecutors, court managers, defence barristers, to look at the whole of that interface between the police and the courts. The aim, really, I think, if I was to capsulate it quite simply now, is to look at the whole criminal justice system, from police to prisons through courts, and to fix what's broken, to find out what is not working, to have, within the shortest possible time, the whole of that system operating to a minimum standard. So it's operating. There is time to develop much of it to a higher standard that we would want to see, but at the moment it's about fixing it, it's about making sure it works. Why is it important to make sure it works? Because those institutions, police, judiciary, penal, are essential for a Palestinian state. They're essential for a democratic state. We need to develop the judiciary. The police must be responsible to a civilian ministry, the Ministry of the Interior, and they must be accountable to an independent judiciary. So we need all those blocks in place to ensure that you have that system. As I said, we are expanding. Currently we are recruiting additional officers, and we hope to be up to 70, 53 internationals, 17 nationals by the end of September, and that will then take us forward into next year. It's a long process. Developing a police is a 2 to 3 year process. We really started last summer, so we're still only in early parts of it. But I think it's starting to be seen on the streets. Visibility of what we're doing is now coming through, and I hope that will continue. Thank you.